If you have pet allergies, you may have heard people say, just get a hypoallergenic dog. You might have seen lists online of dogs like poodles, schnauzers, even Portuguese water dogs being labeled as allergy-free. But what does that mean? And is there really such a thing as a truly hypoallergenic dog? In this episode, we're busting common myths and breaking down the science behind pet dander. We'll give you practical tips for managing pet allergies so you can finally stop asking, can I get a dog? And start answering, yes, I can. Welcome back to Allergy Actually.
Oh, I am just like loving and living vicariously through your doggos, like through the screen, because I grew up with dogs. I love them. I also do not have the bandwidth quite yet to keep another living thing fed and watered on the regular, but
I'm just loving Amber's dog because for those of you who aren't watching this and just listening, she is massive, like massive. And so when she like lifts her up, and then a minute ago, she got scared when we did the clap and starts recording, and she like ran off into the floor. And I have a little itty bitty mini dachshund, and she is an English cream. So she's blonde. So she kind of looks like a baby golden retriever, and she's almost 3 years old. She didn't want to get in my lap. I offered, but she's perched above my chair. So she kind of thinks she's a cat. We have a cat. And so she wants to be like her cat brother. But yeah, this is something that comes up all the time with patients.
They'll say to us like, oh, well, or, if I say, do you have a dog at home? Yeah, but it's hypoallergenic. Or if they don't have a dog and they want to get one, can you help me pick a hypoallergenic dog? And hypoallergenic dog is a marketing term, you guys. We're going to bust that myth today. There's not a real hypoallergenic dog. I think what people mean is getting a dog that maybe doesn't shed as much or has less dander, but all dogs have skin, which is where the dander comes from. All dogs have hair. So if you have a dog, you are exposed to the hair and the dander. There's no way to get around that or get away from it.
One of the things patients say to me a lot is, well, my dog doesn't have fur. So these other dogs have hair. So I think sometimes in people's minds, that's a big distinction for them. And that's why they call things like golden doodles or whatever other dogs have hair versus, in quotations, fur, that is the big difference. And so there are times whenever if the patient isn't being bothered by their dog, they're not allergic, I don't always go into a lot of detail and burst their bubble, to be quite frank. But if they're truly saying, like, I have a dog allergy, can I get a dog? I'm going to get a hypoallergenic one, definitely one that has hair instead of fur. We have to have this conversation. And so I always tell them the protein that we're allergic to is inside of dogs' bodies. And so it's also going to be in their saliva, and it's going to come through their skin. And so that happens whether you have fur or hair or not. And so that is actually not a consideration for, I think, an allergist whenever we talk about hypoallergenic dogs or dogs that you might tolerate. And the other thing that's weird about dog allergy is there are different proteins in dogs that humans can be allergic to. And it is very real that sometimes you can tolerate being around one dog better than you can another. So that's not your imagination. That is a real thing.
Well, we see that variability in the extracts that we get to test people.
Right.
So for a bit of backstory, when we allergy test patients in the office and we do those little scratch tests with the little scratchers, not needles, right? The plastic scratchers, we are able to purchase purified allergen from one of several different distributors. And there are some allergens that if you buy it from one distributor to the next, that it's standardized, meaning it's exactly the same. But a lot of allergens, dog being one of those, are not standardized. And there is variability between how the ratio or how much of those different component proteins are a part of that allergen test mix. So I know when I was at my previous office I worked at, we started with 2 different companies' extracts that we would test to. So we would test everyone to dog twice. And it was not uncommon that you would sometimes see someone have both positive or one of each positive. And then at some point along the way, a third company came out with another extract that was supposed to be better. So we trialed all 3 for a little while and then decided to scale back to the 2 that gave us what we thought to be the most accurate results.
And just to explain a little bit what standardized means there's a reference that the FDA holds for certain standardized allergens. And I think we're at 19. There are some grasses, short ragweed, cat. So anyways, they're different species of grass, but don't quote me on the 19, guys. Don't blow up our comment. Like, it's 21. I don't know. There are specific ones that the FDA holds certain standards of, and that's what the manufacturers have to match up against to say, yeah, we're distributing or selling the highest quality of extract. So as allergists, if allergists are listening, you're like, oh, I know which one Kara was talking about that had the newer one that came out. And I don't know what your guys' kind of internal results were, but that company states that their process helps give you a more predictable, standardized amount of CanF1, which is the major dog allergen. So just kind of an insider guide to when you're going to the allergist to get skin tested and then to get immunotherapy, we know the science behind how the different extracts are made, and that's how we determine which extract we purchase for testing and treatment.
I can't find it right now. I tried to do a quick lit search, but there was a paper that was published by two notable authors in our field, but they looked at the different levels of CanF1 and is it CanF3? I can't remember the other CanF that we look at as far as proteins exactly, but they looked at different dog breeds and like the amounts of each of those proteins that they produced, essentially like to try to figure out if there really was, a particular breed, and it was a hot mess. Like there was no, it was all over the place. There was no difference. And so I remember thinking that that was very interesting that we actually had some validated data for that.
That is interesting.
Yeah, I'll have to send it to you guys whenever I re-find it again. So you can take a look. It's just interesting background stuff. One thing I do tell patients though, who are allergic and want a dog or have a dog. So number one, we can, I always say fix it, but we can make that much better with immunotherapy. And that can be the regular allergy shots. It could be something called ILIT, which is interlymphatic immunotherapy. There are various methods that are very effective for dog allergy. Mm-hmm. And if you're wanting to bring a pet into your home and you have been tested for dog and, had dog allergy, but you're not really ready to commit to shots or anything like that, I always tell people the best method to get a pet whenever you know that you're allergic, or even if you're not sure that you're allergic but suspicious, it's a good idea to try to spend time with it first, because again, we can't say that getting this hypoallergenic dog is going to work. We just established there's no such thing. But if there is a way for you to spend some time with the animal itself, and it's hard because when you spend time, you become attached and then you don't care if it makes you sneeze. But that is something, that is a way to do it if you can do that and see. And, it may worsen over time, but still that can give you an idea about tolerability for that particular dog.
Yeah, I give similar advice and I 100% agree. Number one, if you want to get a dog and you're allergic to dog and are symptomatic, meaning when you're around dogs, you have your asthma flares or you get bothersome congestion, drainage that would, disrupt your quality of life if you were living with a dog, just fix the allergy. That's the best thing we can do for you, rather than you trying to say, okay, maybe I should get the smallest dog that doesn't shed. So what are we looking at here? Like a King Charles
Maybe like sit on my head.
Yeah, what you have, Meagan, those beautiful mini dachshunds, like you can make all these rationalizations to yourself about, well, I'm going to pick the dog with the least fur or dander. But in the end, you don't really know. You're taking a gamble. And if you commit to adopting a dog, it's not fair to the dog to adopt it on a gamble to say, we'll see how it works out. You need to either fix it or, like you suggested, Meagan, test it out beforehand. See if you can do a test run of fostering for 2 to 4 weeks before you commit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think, one of the themes we've talked about a lot in our most recent episodes is this idea of the additive effect of inflammation. And if you think about, if you are allergic to your fur baby, that is a nidus or kind of an element that is going to continue to drive inflammation over the long term. And so it's echoing what you're saying, but it really does make a huge difference to be proactive about that. I think some other things you could do to set yourself up for success, if you do have allergy, maybe you're undergoing immunotherapy at the time, but it hasn't fully kicked in yet, Making sure you have a pet-free zone in your bedroom is huge. Sleep is a time for your body to rest, to recover, to repair. And so if you're, able to keep that a lower allergen space, it's really important. So keeping the pet out of there, keeping an air purifier that's adequately sized for that room, super important. Making sure to wash your sheets on hot and dry on hot to get any allergen that's being carried along with you into the room or through the vents, right? To periodically be getting that off. And then being proactive about your medication regimen, because we know that oftentimes if we're able to use medication ahead of time and more proactively, we don't need as much to rescue. Like keeping the horses in the barn.
Another way to minimize exposure to your dog is weekly bathing. There's been data looking at that. And I know some patients will say, well, my dog's skin is too sensitive for weekly bathing. Okay, well, then do daily brushing or something like that. But anything you can do to reduce the amount of hair that is coming off of the dog, which takes hair and dander into your aero environment, can be helpful for reducing exposure. But I'm just a big believer, if you are a dog person, I'm a dog person.
Yeah.
If you love dogs, whether you're allergic or not, you should have the freedom to get the dog you want. Because if you're like me and you love golden retrievers that are super hairy and they shed everywhere,
Tumbleweeds.
we can help you get your dream dog by treating your dog allergy.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And something that, as far as some allergists are, at least in the past, for unclear reasons, would always say you have to get rid of your pet.
Yeah.
And that's the first thing I tell my patients is I'm not going to tell you to get rid of your pets. There was a great study done by a fellow at Cleveland Clinic now about 10 years ago that said people would rather get rid of their allergist than they would their pet. Would I?
Yep.
Yeah, it was really good data. I remember I actually walked by the poster, I think, I was either one of the national meetings, the College of the Academy for Allergy, but it was so funny. And I was like, that's real. That is absolutely real. So if you have an allergist that says your only solution is to get rid of your dog, just please know that there are more things out there that can be done to help you out. And something people really underestimate is the emotional benefit of having an animal. I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist, but I'm sure there's data out there. And I just know personally for me, it really enhances my life to have my little, ragamuffin. So
it enhances my life to see your beautiful dog.
She's being shy today. She's not really participating. She's just ignoring all of it.
To your point about allergists in the past telling people to get rid of dogs, and I feel like nowadays allergists are not taught that way. They're taught okay, no, right, our patients are going to get rid of us. I saw the most wonderful patient the other day, 82-year-old woman who had an allergy to, I think it was a cat for her, but she had allergies her whole life. And she told me a story about how when she was in her 20s, she went to an allergist to see what they could do about her cat allergy because she loved her cat. And the allergist told her to get rid of it. I think they offered her get rid of it or do immunotherapy. And at the time she didn't want to do immunotherapy. And she was like, well, I guess I'm not doing anything. And she never went back. And she finally, 60 years later, was coming full circle. And she was like, I'm ready to do immunotherapy. I was like, oh, let's go, lady. Let's enjoy this cat. And maybe you get a dog too.
It's so cute and so wonderful. I am thinking back to a few years back, I was proctoring exams for medical students. So one of my roles in my previous life as an academic physician was to be behind the curtain, so to speak, behind the secret screen where medical students would be interacting with standardized patients. So they're actors that have a script and they are going through a particular scenario in order to show that the medical student has competency in getting that story from a patient, doing a physical exam and thinking through the problem. So if I remember correctly, this particular scenario wasn't allergy specific, but it was related to a patient who was immunocompromised. And there were particular recommendations that they needed to make related to pet care, because if someone has a severe immunodeficiency, they're at increased risk for infections from their pets. So this student pretty much just told the patient in their counseling that they needed to get rid of the pets. And so in the feedback, I was like, as an allergist, if I told patients this, they wouldn't come see me anymore. So here's what I would suggest next time, that they wear gloves and a mask and wash their hands if they're changing the litter box. But it just made me, think about like, yeah, that doesn't fly.
No.
And it's a very paternalistic way to practice medicine now, whatever you say, you have to work it, because something like having a pet, I think that obviously that's a collaborative decision.
Yeah.
The patient has to buy in. And that's sometimes you ever get disappointment when people really want, like as a parent, they really want like their kid to test positive, or, because I get a lot of divorce situations with that.
Oh,
And
yeah.
there's a lot of battle where they're like, well, I want to see if they're positive to cat or dog. And we all know that there's the existence of something called non-allergic rhinitis, which is when you get symptoms like nasal sinus type symptoms from irritants. And, pet dander and pet protein can be an irritant. Cats in particular are very irritating. I always explain, we can do the test, but this isn't something that, I never will recommend that you have to get rid of the pet. So that if you're hoping I'm going to stand with you in court to say you must get rid of your dog, I'm
going to do it.
So just to summarize, if you're looking for a hypoallergenic dog, that's not a real term. If what you're really looking for is a companion and you're allergic to dogs and you really want a dog, find a local allergist, get tested. If you're allergic, truly allergic, we can treat that with immunotherapy so that you can have the joy of living with and loving a pet for the rest of your life if you choose to. So with that, we're going to wrap up this episode of Allergy Actually. Don't forget to comment with your favorite kind of dog, or something about, why your dog is the best kind of dog. And I'm going to make sure to comment about golden retrievers. Hit the notification bell, subscribe, and stay tuned for our next episode of Allergy Actually.